So then what do you say to somebody who says, but I have to apply, I have to start law school this cycle, I have to start law school this fall?
I say to them, why?
I'm 27. I don't want to take a gap year.
And I say, why? Be patient, be patient, be patient.
Hello and welcome to episode 440 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I'm Nathan Fox. With me is Ben Olson. We're the co-founders of LSATdemon.com and the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. You can be LSAT famous, share news and ask questions on our website, thinkinglsat.com. You can also email a voice recording of your question to help@thinkinglsat.com. Just keep it under 30 seconds and record from a quiet place, please.
We've only got one of those, but I loved it. And it was so well recorded. I mean, maybe it's going to set a high bar, but I hope more people do.
It is a way to skip the line. We get lots of emails asking lots of questions. And if you want to skip the line, use your voice. That is the way to do that. That goes for life in general, huh?
That does. Yeah. Pick up the phone. You're going to get,
if you want to skip the email, skip the line, stop fucking emailing. Just call someone or show up in person and just be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Ben, this is not a pain in the ass at all. You're opening your class to everybody for free.
Yep.
On February 19th. That's 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. How do people register for that?
They can go to lsatdemon.com/free. They go there and then they can sign up for this class. I'm going to be doing games.
lsatdemon.com/free. I'm looking at the syllabus right now. There's 2 games that are already on that syllabus, and then there's bonus logical reasoning questions, I guess, if you have more time, huh?
Yep,
so students could get started right now by working on those games ahead of time, and they would be well prepared for your class on February 19th. Of course, they don't have to do that if they don't want to, but they can just show up.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lsatdemon.com/free.
Yep.
Is the link to register for all of our upcoming free classes. Okay. Later in the show today, we're going to play an interview that I recorded yesterday with Maya Russell. She is the pre-law advisor at Furman University. She's also the chair of the Pre-Law Advisor National Council, which is called Plank, and she's the president of the Southern Association of Pre-Law Advisors, which is called SAPLA. We talked for over an hour. She is really useful. I can tell that the people who have her as their pre-law advisor are extremely blessed. I know that we've talked a lot of shit about some pre-law advisors, or at least some advice that we've heard from pre-law advisors, which goes totally against everything we ever say on this show, but not so with Maya. She was really great. I want to apologize for calling her Maya at the beginning and middle of the podcast. I only figured out that it was Maya at the end of the podcast. But anyway, we'll get around to that later. First, we have this study. LSAT Demon student James shared a study from Access Lex on application timing among historically underrepresented applicants. We have a link to the full report that'll go in the show notes. I've read it. Ben, you've read it. Producer Eric helpfully wrote a bunch of summary bullet points for us. You want to start, though? What did you take away from this report from Access Lex?
Well, it wasn't super surprising. They basically just said, hey, if you apply later, your chances of getting accepted drop. Yes.
They report of the people who were in their study, this is 186 applicants over 2 years.
Yeah.
They are a different group of applicants. Part of getting into the program requires a 25th percentile or lower LSAT score.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Okay.
Yeah, it's not like they went out and sampled all law school applicants or even all historically underrepresented applicants. They are studying people who are in the Access Lex program, and to get into the Access Lex program, you have to do certain things, including having a terrible LSAT.
Yeah.
To get into the program to begin with.
Okay.
So anyway, these particular group of applicants who are underrepresented, and it seems like they genuinely need a lot of help. Among those people, there was a 40% acceptance rate for people who applied early or on time, which they're calling before February 1.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, wow, that's a super late date.
Yeah. That said, there was a much worse acceptance rate, only 24% acceptance rate for the people who applied on or after February 1.
Yeah.
So even with they have selected a pretty damn late date in the calendar. I mean, we would never recommend that people apply in January.
Yeah.
But 40% of these folks at least got in. I guess it's just acceptance rate. So it's got to just be they got into a school.
Yep. Exactly.
But only 20. So 40% if you applied before February 1, only 24% if you applied after February 1. I wish they would have studied what happens if you apply before December 1st or before November 1st. But it doesn't seem like that's something that they studied.
Well, that's this study is wildly skewed, right? Because looking at applicants with such low LSAT scores already hobbles their application in a lot of ways. So one other thing they said in this study, right, is that scholarships don't change much. Doesn't matter whether you apply early or late. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe that's because for that cohort of student, you're not going to look at scholarships regardless of when you apply.
Yeah. And they whiffed completely. I mean, one of my main complaints, and Eric agreed when he did his review of this report, is that they only asked them a binary question. Did you get a scholarship? Did you not get a scholarship? Well, wait a second. We know, and it's obvious, and they fucking know this too. They have to know this, right? It's not like they can't. Law school scholarships, it's not like full ride or nothing. It's full ride, half ride, quarter ride, $5,000.
Yeah, a little
pat on the head.
A little piece of candy to make you feel excited about.
Yeah, just like, oh, sign up today and you get a free tacos, And it's like, oh, great. That's a scholarship. That would count just the same as a full ride in their studies, which renders it completely worthless, especially when we look at how many schools out there are where it's like 85% of the class or 90% of the class is getting some kind of a grant. Anything else you wanted to talk about in this study?
Well, I wanted to hear you say more about their solution.
So their solution seems to be, and we'll get into this a little bit in my interview with Maya, that'll play later in this show. Yeah. She gave me some promising information, which is that these outreach programs she thinks are shifting toward a 24-month timeline instead of a 12-month timeline.
Okay.
So the thing that has always killed me about Access Lex and all of these programs, like every pipeline program that I've ever seen, seems to start with the idea that like, okay, you're starting this program now and you're going to apply to law school at the end of the program.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, and they studied it, they did what they call timing interventions on some students, and they didn't do timing interventions on other students. And applicants who did not receive timing intervention applied late 44% of the time, but applicants who did receive timing intervention applied late 23% of the time. So it sounds like you've got, half as many people applying late. But the way that they do it was totally bogus. The way that they did this was, and I can't remember the details exactly, but it was along the lines of, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start you're starting the program in like May. You're going to do a 3-month, I think they gave them a Kaplan course for LSAT.
So they're giving them a course, and the course has a time limit, right?
Yep.
It's like, this is your time frame for preparing for the LSAT.
Yep. And it's just, we try not to mention other prep companies on the podcast. Yeah. But that one is really the worst. And I don't know how they're so mobbed up with all of these, they've been around for forever.
Yeah. The name or something. Yeah.
They just like, I can't tell you how many students we've had refugees from Kaplan, and we've just had to like unpack their brain with all of this bullshit, all these gimmicks that Kaplan gave them that actually hurt their performance.
Yeah. We hear it all the time in class. I'm trying to unlearn things that I learned.
Yeah. And it's nonsensical stuff. It's just like stuff that how does that possibly help you? Really? Yeah. You're going to skim the passage on reading comp and then skim the questions and then, I don't know, just
go back and read it again. And then
just nuts. bonkers like strategies that are clearly like, oh, it's easy to learn. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually help you, but you think you learned something. So great.
Yeah.
We've done our LSAT program.
Yeah.
Anyway,
They do the LSAT for 3 months.
so they put them in this course and like schedule their LSAT right away.
Ugh.
And then it's like, so that's the timing intervention, is that they're forcing them onto a particular calendar. And so, apparently that does help them to apply earlier, and people who apply earlier do have a better chance of getting in. But I think the reality of the situation is that none of these people are getting great offers to go to law school. Like, they started with a very poor LSAT. Their class probably didn't help them very much. Then they took the LSAT once, then they applied right away. And then you're happy that 40% of them got an offer, but those 40% who got any offer, those are going to be terrible offers.
No, this is a situation where the intervention could be actually leading to greater harm, right? Because the 24% acceptance rate could have actually been a blessing to a lot of these applicants who should not have gone to school for full price.
And this is why I'm extremely, extremely hesitant about all of these pipeline programs, because even though they're very well-meaning, and I believe everybody when they say that they want a more diverse bar.
Sure.
Absolutely. I believe you. I totally believe you, Access Lex. I totally believe every single person who's involved in this program. I believe you that you want a more diverse bar. But this program seems like all it does is leads to more applicants right now, with people who don't seem like they're probably really ready to apply. And then you're celebrating every time someone gets an offer of admission, when we just cringe seeing offers of admission that don't come with generous scholarship help.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they're looking at a metric, right? They're saying, okay, we want to increase access. We want to make more of these folks get accepted. And if that's your metric, then they have succeeded. But it's it's ignoring the bigger picture, which is the cost of law school and the fact that what's the U.S. average? We have this information.
U.S. average for what?
Percentage of people who are paying full price, percentage of people who are getting full ride scholarships. Let me look here really quick. Okay. Based on the U.S. average, I just went to lsatdemon.com/tuition. 8% of students in the entire legal, the U.S. law school system, 8% pay no tuition, 19% pay full tuition. So less than a fifth pay full tuition. And yet probably everybody in this study, given the demographic that they're looking at and the LSAT numbers that they're looking at, are paying full price. So they've just increased this 19%.
Right. And so then it's like, and there doesn't even have to be anybody nefarious. It could just be that a bunch of well-meaning people got together and built something that has nefarious results.
100%.
But
yes.
It seems as if these programs, all they really do is just steer people toward borrowing a lifetime worth of money to go to law school.
Yep.
Again, exactly as you said, Ben. I mean, look, only 40%, in the best case, only 40% of these people are getting any offer at all.
Mm-hmm.
Applicants who applied early still only had a 40% acceptance rate. But if your cohort is only getting a 40% acceptance rate, so 60% aren't even getting in anywhere, despite all your interventions.
Yeah.
You took them through the whole application process, by the way. Like, they wrote a personal statement, they got letters of recommendation, they got their transcripts submitted, they did the full LSAT course, took the test, applied to these schools, and only 40% of them get any offer at all. Then you're thrilled about the 40% who got some offer, but those 40% are the people who are going to pay the most for law school and get the least out of it.
Yeah.
Now, there are always exceptions. And in my interview with Maya, she was quick to point out that, yeah, there are exceptions, which I don't disagree with. And, for those people who it worked out really well for them, then great.
Mhm.
You know, maybe some of these people got a scholarship. Maybe some of these people really excelled in law school.
Yeah.
But on average, these people are going to be graduating near the bottom of their class because that's how it works. They give scholarships to attract higher LSAT, higher GPA, better equipped to compete in law school.
Yeah.
And yes, there can be exceptions who buck all those trends, but on average, we are pretty average. And
Yeah.
so they're like, just what about all the people who are incurring a lifetime of debt who will not find successful employment in law school or after law school? I, I just, I think that these programs can do more harm than good.
I agree.
And the thing that really strikes me the most, and hopefully Maya is right, that they're going to go to a longer time frame. It would be great if they could get them some better LSAT help. Longer time frame, multiple repeats of the LSAT, and then don't force people into applying. Like, don't apply unless you can get numbers that look like they're going to get you the right school at the right price. Then apply.
Yeah, that's what they need to shift their focus. Number of acceptances with offers that are reasonable. And I
Well,
would define reasonable as half or
just
less.
how about total debt? I mean, like, expand the length of this study. I wish they would follow this particular cohort. I would love to know, of the 40% who applied early or on time and got accepted. Let's talk to those people 5 years from now. Are they practicing law? How much debt do they have?
Mm, yeah,
Because I'm really concerned that you're going to have a couple people who are going to succeed, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are going to incur, a mortgage worth of student loan debt
100%. Yeah.
without having, job opportunities that would justify anything close to that kind of debt.
I do want to talk about one more thing that kind of surprised me in the study. They talked about how people who had applied before, so maybe in the previous cycle, and then applied again as part of this study, I guess, that didn't seem to help those people realize that they should apply earlier. And the study mentioned something about people with, I guess they kind of group people into people who had access to information about the application process and those who didn't. And there was a correlation between that and them applying earlier. And it just made me think about the podcast, people's access to information. Like, if you just go into this process and you don't seek out information about how this game is played, you're going to play it poorly and you're going to keep playing it poorly.
Yeah.
It's so critical that people get access to information, but also good information about how to apply. I mean, it just made me think about anyone who's listening to this and has heard our GLAD approach. I mean, that is leaps and bounds above so many other applicants who are just doing what they think they should do. Just random,
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Maya, by the way, was 100% in on our GLAD plan of you're in undergrad now. Take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Learn, actually talk to your professors, get good grades. And by the way, like, the fun stuff, if you're
Yeah.
going to have fun in school, undergrad is the time to do it.
Yeah.
The lifelong friends and all that stuff. Yeah, do that while you're in undergrad. Also get
Yeah.
straight A's.
Yeah.
Then start thinking about the LSAT. And
Yeah.
do that until you have the number that's going to get you where you want to go for the price you want to pay, which Maya said she is intensely interested in with her students. She talks about applying broadly. She talks about waiting until all the offers are in before you make any decisions.
Mm.
She's really, which I was very thrilled to hear, really, that she was so interested in not just getting people in, but making sure that they're paying a fair price.
Yeah.
Then apply after the LSAT's done. Then decide, once all the offers come in, where and even whether you're going to accept any of those offers.
Yeah.
I worry, Ben, that these programs, this Access Lex program and other programs, I just worry that they're giving these poor kids enough rope just enough rope to hang themselves.
Yep.
100%.
They got them in versus not getting in. If they hadn't gotten in, they're feeling depressed and sad that they didn't get into law school, but you're also not incurring all that debt.
Oh, 5 years from now, the people who didn't get in, I think are going to be better off than the people who did in
Yeah.
this particular study.
Yeah. That's
And
the
that
thing.
they don't recognize that, they're going to assume that it's just an unequivocal good. We
Mhm.
want a more diverse bar. We want access to justice, which I do too. I totally do. I agree with those goals.
But this is not how
Not
to
at the
achieve them.
price of these individual students incurring mountains of debt.
Well, the story that they tell themselves is once you get accepted to law school, then it's happily ever after.
Oh, this is a win, no matter what. It's just a
Yeah.
win. Yeah. Um, there were other bogus things in the study that I just had to shake my head at. I forget exactly where it was. I can probably find it. In fact, I should find it because I'm going to accuse them of committing an actual LSAT flaw.
Mm.
Yeah. So they have some text that said that people who applied very early were the least likely to receive a law school scholarship. It says that on page 13. I'm pretty sure that that's least likely to receive a scholarship alongside their admission. Yes, it says that at the top. It says on-time applicants were the most likely to receive a scholarship alongside their admission, followed by late applicants. Very early applicants were least likely to receive a law school scholarship alongside their admission. But that's just because when you apply really early, they haven't done the scholarship stuff yet, so the scholarship offers come out later. So they're making it look like you don't get, and in fact, they present a table 3, description of scholarship award by application timing, and it shows the percentages. It also shows N for each of these groups, N being the number of people in the sample. So their sample was 28 people who applied early, 23 people who applied on time, and 14 people who applied late. Then in the narrative text, they acknowledge small sample sizes do not allow us to fully examine the relationship between application time and scholarship awards. And then they do the LSAT flaw.
Okay.
This is a literal flaw from an LSAT question.
Yeah.
Where they tell you that the sample's too small.
But
Then they say, our findings may suggest that while the strategy of applying early could increase an applicant's likelihood of receiving an admission offer, it does not necessarily increase their likelihood of receiving a scholarship. And so they're saying, we acknowledge that our sample is too small. Nonetheless, here's the findings.
sounds like they threw in the word may there, I guess. Might help them a little bit. But
Bullshit. It's deceiving. They put the table on the page. If
Yeah.
the sample's too small, then you
Yeah.
don't put the table on the page. Because if you put the table on the page, naturally our eye gravitates and they look at that and they go, oh shit. And it's doubly misleading because it's alongside their offer of admission, not did they eventually receive scholarship money.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the first group is going to be the group that's going to get the best scholarship offers because they were there first. They probably have the best applications. Then again, their N is so small that you can't draw any. God. Anyway, I can stop ranting about this. I don't mean to attack these people. I think that everybody involved is well-meaning.
Yeah.
But the upshot of all of this, like I can just see all the law schools looking at this going, oh, great. Perfect. More applicants for us. Fantastic. Like, yes, let's do more of these timing interventions because it's time right now. Like I got to get my class filled this year again,
Yep.
like they always do.
Yeah.
And so they're always happy to get more applications right now.
Yeah.
And they just want more grist for the mill. They want more people that they can potentially charge full price.
Yeah.
And just sadly, this program seems like it's, let's see how we can take money from the student loan program and give it to these schools.
Yes.
Via these kids.
Yep.
And access is great. And I want access. I want a diverse bar. I want justice, access to justice. I want all those things. But I do not want impoverished students with low chances of the kinds of jobs that they think they're going to get after becoming a big fancy lawyer. All right. Enough of that. Let's how about we cut here to my interview with Maya Russell. When we come back, we'll do word of the week, and then we will wrap it up. All right, here's that interview with Maya. And I apologize for calling her Maya. So Maya Russell is my guest today. She is the pre-law advisor at Furman University. She's also the chair of the Pre-Law Advisor National Council, which we call PLANC, P-L-A-N-C. Again, Pre-Law Advisor National Council. President of the Southern Association of Pre-Law Advisors, that's SAPLA. Co-chair for the American Association of Law Schools, that's AALS. I guess you don't have a name for that. Or do you do like ALS?
So the AALS, and the AALS has many, many sections.
Oh, you're sorry. The section on pre-law education and admission to law school pre-law advisor committee. Is that right?
So we have the PLEALS, which is the Pre-Law Education and Admission to Law School Committee. Okay. And within that larger committee, we now also have a pre-law advisor group that has joined because so much of it discusses the pre-law advising piece in admissions. Just new this year, we have added pre-law advisors, a pre-law advisory group to that section. So yes, it's the AALS PLEALS section PLA committee.
Okay.
We haven't come up with a good name. Let us know if you come up with something that works.
Yeah, we'll work on it. You're also on the pre-law advisory committees for Access Lex and JD Next. Boy, so we got a lot of stuff to talk about, but let me finish this bio. You received your JD from the University of North Carolina School of Law. Prior to joining Furman University, Maya served as an attorney for the United States District Court for the districts of Wyoming and South Carolina, and she's been a faculty member at Casper College and University of Wyoming, Casper.
Yes, yeah. So in the 20 years or so since graduating, I attended both NYU as an undergraduate and Chapel Hill for law school as an international student. So Perth, Western Australia is home. And after graduating from law school, I still did not have any form of working papers. So ended up following my husband to the University of Montana and had an opportunity to bring in an income going back to doing another master's degree. So while I was waiting for all of the papers, et cetera, to process to be able to use my degree, I ended up getting my first interaction in academia, which was fun. I got to TA a couple of classes and teach some undergraduate sections. So that was step one out of law school. Then I followed my husband through his academic career, grabbed a couple of bars along the way, and have worked for some phenomenal judges along the way. Have really split the last 20 years, about half time now in academia, and about half the time in courthouses, essentially. But have always just loved the teaching, loved the advising, loved connecting with students, loved the enthusiasm that they bring to my office every day, and their excitement for the future is just contagious. So I think just over 6 years ago, I had the opportunity. We had a retirement here at Furman University, which is in Greenville, South Carolina, a beautiful place to live. But we had a retirement. A longtime pre-law advisor faculty member was stepping down. And so the university hired, I switched over from the courthouse and joined the university. I'm a full-time dedicated pre-law advisor. So I now do advising only. I do not, so many of my pre-law advisor colleagues are faculty, they're researching. Many of them are deans, many of them are general counsels at their home universities. They wear so many hats, and I consider myself incredibly fortunate that I get to focus on pre-law advising and finding fun ways to both advocate and support my students along the path.
Yeah. It seems like dedicated pre-law advising seems like the only way to go, given the stakes that are involved. Law school tuitions, we're looking at $50,000 a year times 3, and it's the beginning of your whole legal career. If you're getting bad advice from your pre-law advisor, because they're busy writing treatises or teaching classes or whatever they've got on their plate, It just seems a little unfortunate that those people would be then also doling out admissions advice.
Yeah, and I think many of my colleagues do a phenomenal job with the limited
Yeah.
time that they have, but many of them are doing it entirely as volunteers.
Mm.
It's not what they are paid to do. So again, I consider myself very fortunate. The other thing in pre-law advising, things were the same for quite a long time. There was a pencil paper LSAT, and it had so many
Sure.
sections, and it was this amount of time. And in the last couple of years, with the pivot to the digital LSAT, with the introduction of the GRE, now with the data that they're collecting on the JD Next, and just all of these various arenas, in addition to now the introduction of the next gen bar exam, it's keeping up with the changes that are just constant and ongoing. I consider that, a critical part of my job, and because I do have the good fortune of being able to try to stay on top of so many of these changes, and building communities and building networks so that we can stay on top of all these changes. I'm then able to share it with my SAPLA board members, who then share it with our larger group. Those of us in Plank, part of what we see our role as is making sure that we're getting all of these critical changes communicated to the other pre-law advisors that are out there that don't have the same amount of time to spend on top of these. Sometimes I feel like it's weekly, other times I feel like it's daily updates. This was my first AALS conference that I attended. That was the first week of January this year. And that was a fantastic opportunity to connect with the law schools and hear from their points of view. It was defending democracy was the theme this year, and hearing from the different law school deans, the different law school faculty, and then those in my own section as well, the PLEALS, the pre-law education and admission to law school section, about just some of the key issues that are on their radar, again, so we can communicate that and make sure that the information that's being shared with the pre-law advisors through our APLAs, through Plank, is accurate and up to date, because it is moving, and we want to give our students accurate information when we're meeting with them.
Sure. Let's back up a little bit. I don't think Perth, Australia is known for its connections to North Carolina. How did that move happen?
Yeah, I had a parent who was doing a project in the Research Triangle, and I came to visit. I was very, as a teenager, basketball was one of my top priorities, and I started playing with a travel ball team, etc., and attended for a short period of time a local high school there, and was picked up and recruited to play at NYU. So that, as a 17-year-old kid from Australia, and they say, do you want to come live in New York City? You say, yeah, absolutely, let's go. I don't think I even knew that other universities existed. I'm sure I must have had we do know that there are a lot of universities, maybe not quite as many as I now know exist. But again, at 17, as a young Australian kid, you say, do you want to come and go to university and learn and play basketball for a coach that had a phenomenal record? We ended up my first year at NYU winning the national championship. So that was lovely too.
Did you get a ring for that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Although I will say my Furman students, because I've had a handful of students on the basketball team who I'm now working with, the ring that they got after winning their recent, making it as far as they made it in the playoffs this last season. I think my ring is about 1/10 the size of the colossal rings that are now being given out. So, but back in the mid 90s in New York, we were very pleased with our rings.
I can imagine. Yeah. So but you didn't finish school at NYU? You ended up going back to North Carolina?
No. I
Oh, you did finish.
I went to undergraduate at NYU.
I got it. Okay.
Yep.
And then you
So
ended up for your
I
JD
yep.
at UNC.
And then yes. Well, so I had and I tell my students, you've got lots to learn from me because I went to law school for all the absolute wrong reasons. So I
Same.
did my 4 years of undergraduate at NYU. Because I had been on the basketball team and things like that, I really was part of Perth is so far away. I mean, if you channel through the globe from where I'm sitting right now, you'll come out in my hometown. It is
Right.
the opposite side of the world. It is so hard to get to.
Yeah.
And I think I had a fire under me that I needed to travel as much as possible and experience as much as possible before I ended up back home. And, I would have to start work and my travel life was over. And because it's so far away, it wasn't easy as easy, maybe as a little easier now to bounce around. But very focused on wanting to get out and travel as much as possible. So I ended up my final year at NYU, I did at NYU in Paris. And so had the good fortune to live there for a year, ended up executing my Commonwealth visa. So even though I couldn't work here in the States, I was able to get some work in the EU and get paid work, which was helpful. And so just had a tremendous time. So to get back in the country, because I still wasn't ready at that point in time to give away my travel ambitions, I went to law school. So ended up coming back into igniting my I-20, coming back into the country, and ended up doing the 3 years of law school in North Carolina.
Okay, so JD at University of North Carolina School of Law. Then you went to
Montana,
U.S. District Court. Oh, Montana first, then Wyoming.
Well, because remember, I still didn't have working papers, so the only
Okay.
way I could work after law school was to stay in academia. So ended up following my husband, who was doing a degree at Montana. We ended up getting married the night before law school graduation. Again, something I tell my students they should never do.
We don't
Bad
have to
idea
do
to
anything
pair
at
the
law
two.
school graduation, though, right? You just show
No,
up.
but it was just a tough weekend. Even just
Yeah,
making the
yeah.
drive to get there was tough, but that's okay. It was
Yeah.
fun. And hey, when your family's coming in from Australia, you only want them to have one visit. You don't want to break it into two. So we were trying to be kind and be inclusive. But
Gotcha.
yes. Yeah. So we ended up pivoting all over the place. Primarily, my husband, who was doing a mathematics degree, ended up pivoting to a statistics degree. He did his PhD in statistics at Colorado State University, which took us through Colorado. And that's when I took the job up over the border in Wyoming, working for the federal court there. And we ended up actually housing ourselves out of Casper. And we stayed there for quite a period of time. It was a phenomenal place. It was a great place. It's where our children were born, and had a tremendous start to family life with phenomenal colleagues at the U.S. District Court for the District of Wyoming in the Casper office. So had a really great, not only was our local courthouse really and truly a family, because there's one district, right, in Wyoming, there's one university,
Yeah.
there's one law school, so everyone knows each other very, very well. But I was also wore many hats in that role. So one of the hats that I wore was assisting the Judge Cole, who was the full-time dedicated magistrate judge up in Yellowstone National Park. So
Wow.
some days I got to go in the mammoth entrance of Yellowstone National Park and learn about the fact that he'd spent his whole career there, which I just found fascinating. Other days I would travel down to Cheyenne and help one of our other Article 3 judge down there. So whether it be, it could be from anything from helping with death penalty work to Social Security cases. I mean, I was just there to help as needed, and just really enjoyed the people in Wyoming, which I think is why we stayed as long as we did. But after my husband finished his PhD, he ended up taking a job at Clemson University, which is how we ended up here in sunny South Carolina.
Got it. And okay, so then you transferred, it looks like, to the U.S. District Court in South Carolina?
Yeah, so when I first got down here, I had been teaching for the last 4 years before coming down here, and was still doing some remote teaching, and was teaching the law curriculum in a politics and criminal justice departments, and thought that it would be an easy transition. South Carolina has plenty of universities, and that was certainly not the case. So ended up pivoting back to the federal courthouses just to re-engage, initially filling out a maternity term leave, and then I was commuting from Clemson to Columbia during that time, and that just was not sustainable. So as soon as I had an opportunity to pivot back to the Greenville office, which is about a 45-minute commute, that was much better than the 2 hours.
Ooh,
so now we live in Clemson, which is a fun college town, university town.
Sure.
And I commute into Greenville to Furman each day, and Furman, I think it was just announced, we're one of the Duke Endowment schools, Furman University. And so they have really done a phenomenal job of building, mentoring, and advising support, narrowly tailored mentoring and advising. So I work in the Office of Pre-Professional Advising, where I help any of the students who are interested in investigating legal careers, pursuing legal careers. But the rest of my office, where we sit within academic affairs, they help all the students who are health careers interested. So I get to handle anyone who's law interested, and the rest of my office handles the abundance of health careers, which all have their own advising pieces, dental, medical, etc. So I think my job is a lot easier. I got the easiest job because at least it's one type of program that we're investigating, rather than the plethora of health careers and all the various graduate schools.
Do you ever try to steer people down the hall?
Like
they come to you
I
not
actually
really knowing what they're doing, looking for pre-law advising, and you go,
so
jobs over there?
a lot of our students are work with both of us, because we work with we'll meet prospective students as to why they might want to consider Furman, not only for small class sizes, accessible faculty, it's a residential campus, but this narrowly tailored advising and mentoring, I think is one of the selling points. Is obviously I'm biased, but I think that. But a lot of our students come in and they don't know, I might be interested in health law, or I might be interested in going to medical school. And so our entire office, they'll work with both areas of our office, maybe for multiple years, before they've collected sufficient experiences, internships, shadows, informational interviews. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, you can obviously major in anything to go down these paths, but for the health careers fields, medical school, dental school, optometry, PT, they do have requirements in terms of courses and courses that you are going to need to take for entrance to those programs, or to just to be able to survive the MCAT, etc. Versus law school, that's the nice thing. It's more likely that they start there, because I tell them you've got to, if that is the path that you're leaning towards, you've got to pursue that, because there are required classes. At any moment in time, you change your mind and you decide law school is for you, no worries, pivot. Law school has no required major, no required classes, a robust liberal arts education, no matter what you major in. We're going to work on those key critical skills, ability to communicate effectively, critical thinking skills, ability to read data, whether you're an econ major, whether you're a history major, whether you're a mathematics major, music major. So long as you can convey those passions in your application to law school, you can pivot at any time during your time here at Furman or beyond. The majority of students I work with in any given cycle are actually alumni. They might have got out and done some fellowships or got that work experience enough to now decide they're ready to pivot and commit to law school. So I'm never pushing anyone that law school is right for you. If a student wants to come in and explore the profession, I'm going to try to couple them to make sure that they're getting the exposure to make an informed decision. And if at any point while at Furman or beyond, they decide that law school is right for them, we're going to get together and work together pretty closely to prepare a really robust application, not only to try to gain admissions to the programs that they're wanting to prioritize, but also to try to secure the merit aid that will make it a real option for them to pursue.
You mentioned the importance of merit aid, which is something that we talk about all the time on this podcast. Why is merit aid so important from your perspective?
Yeah, I was an international student, so I didn't qualify for loans. So you figured out how to go to law school that was you're going to be able to pay for, right? And so going to the state school where I was able to qualify for in-state tuition because I had a parent who was paying local taxes 20 plus years ago, I think we were paying about $2,000 a semester for law school, which seemed like a tremendous amount of money back then. I compare and contrast that to some of the loan debt my students are now considering. And I am terrifically debt adverse, and it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous for them. And for some of them, it is not a big deal. I have students who we're looking at what are their career goals, what is their family support, do they have any family support, do they have savings they're willing to put to this, or are we going to take out the full amount in loan debt, and what does that loan debt repayment look like? So those are all various factors that we are looking at. The type of work. A lot of my students are looking for traditional law jobs. Many of them do want to target big law jobs. And those that have done the research and know what that means, I'm less concerned about those students being able to try to live frugally and get that money paid back over a 5-7 year term, for example. But for my students who are focusing on public interest, and we're a very service-driven undergraduate institution, that's why a lot of our students are drawn to us. I have disproportionately high numbers of students who either want to stay here in the Southeast, where earning potential is going to be lower than if you're looking at average numbers for different types of legal jobs. I have a lot of students who are public interest driven. That's why they are going to law school. So we're looking at NALP surveys, and we're looking at the public interest surveys, and we're looking at outcomes, not only within the different areas of law, but in the different geographical regions for what is a realistic salary for the type of law you might want to practice. And I have pretty significant numbers of students looking at JD Advantage jobs. So whether it be in business, whether it be in nonprofit management, whether it be in academia, and we need to really not think about, well, what does my income look like coming out of law school initially, and then longer term, for example. We have Access Lex, who's a nonprofit free access to financing advising for students, which is fabulous. They'll come in and do a financing lecture with my students each cycle. We'll invite the parents along with all the students to collect that information. If there's spouses or other loved ones who's going to be sharing in the debt load, we want everyone to collect that information, but we're using the student loan calculator. And we're sitting down and we're putting, as they're getting right now, starting to get their acceptances, we're comparing and contrasting. We're calculating cost of attendance. We're looking at how much are you going to have to pay back monthly for 10 years if we take the standard 10-year repayment plan. And does that fit with my geographical preferences, job outcomes? And is this something I'm going to be able to manage? I think those are easier conversations to have with my alumni who are better equipped to be able to say, oh my goodness, this is how who have worked with budgets, who've had an income and worked with budgets. For a traditional undergraduate coming straight out, they might still have undergraduate loans, parental support. Yeah. They haven't yet have had to figure that out. And so just understanding you'll have insurance costs, you'll have rental costs, you'll have cell phone costs, you'll have food. Oh my goodness. I mean, there's lots of great budget apps out there. And I tell my students, especially those that do like to travel a lot, and I completely get it, right? Like, do it while you can, but also worried about how we are going to meet those repayment plans while also maintaining the lifestyle that they so desire. So,
well,
we're working through all of those pieces.
Yeah. I'm glad you are. I mean, the truth is that the law school tuition and the amount of loans that many students get themselves into honestly dwarf all of those things that you were just talking about. It's like, yeah, your cell phone is expensive. I mean, and you have to have your cell phone. But compared to, if you graduate from law school with a couple $100,000 in debt, your monthly payment is going to be.
I think we encourage our students to be savvy consumers.
Yeah.
To assess the return on their investment, to understand what their career goals are.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we are building, I want my students to have options. When we are building their school lists, and one of the things we need to push, whether it be the LSAT or whatever their valid and reliable test they're using is we want to have those scores in play before we can build a school list, before we can then sit down and start the application piece. And so for my students, they need to have a broad list of schools. Yes, I want you to have your reach schools where you are willing to take out an additional investment, because possibly we can make an argument that it might UVA channels students into big law. If that's terrifically important to you, then, and you have the profile to pair with that, that might be a good option for this student. But that's not going to be the case for all of my students. We are also making sure that students are looking at safety schools, and we want them to have numerous safety schools where both their LSAT and GPA ideally exceeds medians. Because that's where they're going to be in the best position to secure merit aid. If I have students who we know are going to qualify for needs-based aid, we are looking at the institutions that also possibly, if they meet and are competitive at those institutions, the hybrid needs merit-based aid institutions, because those might ultimately, there's a possibility, depending on how things shake out, they might actually be a best bang for your buck. So
what schools are you talking about?
The needs-based aid, the hybrid needs-based aid. So, for example, I have students at Yale, I have students at Stanford,
Sure.
I have students at Harvard. It's obviously.
So my understanding there is that it's not hybrid at all. It's just they don't give merit-based.
So they are needs-based aid. If you look then down to the next group, so there's needs-based aid. There's a little bit of Stanford has some additional opportunities there, but if you come then down out of that group, that it's pretty much needs-based only, right? Merit's not going to help you because everyone's meritorious. To Duke and some of those other schools that are very popular in my home region, there are some of those big privates that are looking, anyone who collects the CSS profile in addition to the FAFSA that you've completed and are looking at parentals might also have a hybrid needs merit. And that's where our students possibly might be able to secure some additional funding as well to make those manageable.
You said CSS profile?
Excuse me. So there's additional, some of the big privates have additional, in addition, of course, the FAFSA, everyone who's going to need loans for school, right. December 31st this year, the form went live. It took about a week, but they eventually, my students have now been able to complete it. Or start to complete it. You can now add this year with the new form up to 20 schools on your one form, which is fabulous because it used to be 10. Now we can go up to 20 on the one form. But some of the schools, also the big privates, Vanderbilt, Duke, had also collected some additional tax information from parents because there is this hybrid needs merit. Now, that being said, I will say Duke doesn't use the CSS profile anymore. They have now an internal form that you can get as part of your application there. So they're going to collect that information directly. They're not using the additional CSS, which just is another layer of looking at, right? There's a difference between a student who, all of our students don't have any money, right? They're students. They typically have very limited income while they're full-time students. Yeah. But there's a difference, even if parents say, we are not helping you, there's a difference between the parents who could, if necessary, help you meet your rent, a month or
Oh,
for
sure.
some period, right? Like, and so that's what I think the law schools through these additional levels are also looking at a family's ability to help if necessary, and
Sure.
trying to make sure that the financing piece isn't going to prohibit wonderful students from joining their institution.
Got it.
Now, I
So,
will say, just let me add to that. My
yeah.
students, again, on building their really broad list, we are very narrowly tailoring, and we can talk a little bit about how applications have changed this cycle because it is quite significant. But we are, as we're building the lists, and where one of my things that I really enjoy, I put my students, we'll jump in a van, we'll meet, and we go tour law schools, and we talk to the law school admissions teams. We invite the schools to campus. We're having panels come in once a week in the fall just to collect information. But one of the critical pieces is a lot of my students, especially those that are public interest, JD Advantage, interested, etc., they're really targeting the schools that have significant merit aid, if not full ride. So a significant number of my students are going where they get full ride offers.
Same. And it's something that we never stop talking about on this podcast. Have you seen our scholarship estimator, Maya, the tool that we built?
I played around a little bit both with the scholarship list and then the estimator. The schools are so different now. I think the schools also recognize that the loan debt isn't sustainable. And I think more like I'll pick on my local school, South Carolina, the Joseph F. Rice School of Law now. And one of the big things that they have done different from last year to this year is they have more scholarship money to give students. And that is going to draw more of my students who might have gone out of state are going to be able to go to their local in-state school. They're going to be able to stay because they figured out a way to get more scholarships there. UGA is one of those where the students will interview or get an invitation to possibly interview to staff some of the clinics there. And if they're successful in that endeavor, I've got students who are there right now, who have graduated recently, who are on full rides. I mean, that's going to open up their options on the tail end of law school to do things that they're passionate about and enjoy and can really contribute. And they're not forced to take law jobs that they're never going to stay in long term. And so that's what we want for our students. We want them to find, and it certainly doesn't have to be the law, right? It could be so many different things. But we want our students to find satisfying careers. And first, they've got to figure out what they enjoy, what they like, what drives them, what they're passionate about. And if that happens to be law, great. I want you to have options. So when we're applying to law school, we have a broad list, have those reach schools. So we have that cost of attendance calculation to put in play once you go to all your admitted student days and figure out which is the one that your gut speaks to, but have those safeties and make sure that you've got plenty of schools on your list where we are going to be competing for merit aid, so that is one of the pieces, one of the key factors that you're able to sit down as an individual with your family and put into your equation, especially because so many of my students do. You get very comfortable with the climate down in the Southeast, and a lot of people want to stay. And with my students need to know that they're not going to be earning the way that their classmates who go big law Manhattan, big law Chicago, even DC. They're not going to have the same earning, but they also don't have the same overhead. So we're talking through all of these pieces really ad nauseum, but ultimately the student needs to know what is their individual threshold for debt, and what are their long-term goals, and what is the return on the investment, bar passage, employment opportunities. What are those some of those critical factors look like in finding a best fit school for them? Because again, my students are at more states than I can count. They need to go with what is the best fit for them.
I don't want to be a bummer, but it's kind of my job. I want to talk about the double-edged sword of these merit-based scholarships, because somebody at the school has to pay tuition. You mentioned Georgia a second ago.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to just share my screen with you, Maya, and click through this stuff. I'm on my scholarship estimator that we built here. Can you see that, Maya?
I can.
Yeah, okay. So this is just a list of all of the ABA accredited schools, and then you put in an LSAT and a GPA down here, and you hit calculate. There's some other things here like in-state or URM status, and then we estimate. And we pull that data off of last year's ABA 509 reports.
Yes.
So I wanted to look at a school that does give generous merit-based aid, which is University of Georgia Law School, Athens, Georgia. And here we've built, I don't know if you've seen this yet, Maya, but we have a little different way of visualizing the data for each school. Again, this is all just data that's coming right off of that public American Bar Association
Your
Section
509s.
509 report. But this is a way that students can visualize what it might look like for you. Here we've got a 3.3 and a 158 applicant who is a okay applicant for a school like Georgia.
I think
a
that
great
student is going to have a hard time.
Yeah, not a great applicant. And if they do get in, they are going to be bearing the
Pain.
load. Yeah,
Yes.
the thing that I wanted to just point out here is that at a school like this, the schools that do give merit-based scholarships, it's not just like some of the people in the school are getting a merit-based scholarship. Here we have a school where all but 7% of the school is getting some kind of a grant.
So another piece for Georgia, for example, is Georgia State in-state tuition is $17,000. University of Georgia in-state tuition is $19,000. Georgia, North Carolina, Colorado, there are not all the states, but many of the states will let students reclass out of state to in-state 1L year to 2L year should they meet the residency requirements. So again, when we're calculating the 3 years cost of attendance, and I know the max for tuition that you're going to pay 2L year, 3L year, if you don't get a cent, is $19,000. It still may be a better bet for you given the employment, given the bar passage. I do wish Georgia would go UBE, but that's a topic for another date. It obviously is still a state bar, so my students really who do want to live and work in Georgia, we are going to have to decide, are they going to take the UBE and the Georgia bar? But getting back to cost, if you're comparing and contrasting a max 2L 3 year, assuming they can qualify for the equivalency in-state tuition or in-state tuition 2-3L year, it still may be a good option for those students when you look at the total amount they're going to have to take out if they can find savvy ways to keep their living and other expenses down. And so it is actually one of the schools that I'm less concerned about because the in-state tuition is so stellar compared to other places.
But even if you do get the discount, I mean, it's a discounted rate. It's still $20,000, right?
Yeah, but if you're going, I mean, you're investing in this. You're investing in these 3 years for securing outcomes on the tail end.
But then don't you have to compete with these people, the 25% of the class who are there because of their LSAT and their GPA?
I don't know how many of them are going to DC, to New York, to Chicago to focus on other options and not staying there locally. I mean, I don't know. I will tell you, some of my students, I mean, we'll have to, a lot of my students go and focus on the Georgia schools because that is their home state or that is where they want to live and work. But you are going to, on the very top end of most of the schools, lose some of that portion to your DC market, to your New York market, etc., to a certain degree.
That's what raises the average salary of Georgia law grads to what it is, right? Is that, yes, there are some people who are going to go to DC and work in big law and make $180,000 a year. that's largely not the people who are going to stay in Georgia. I mean, I'm sure there's some big law jobs in Georgia as well that the school might get you access to, but I don't know. In my view, these 25% of the people who are there with higher LSAT and higher GPA, that's why they got the merit scholarship to begin with.
Yes. And that's the same at every school, right?
That's the same at every school that offers merit scholarships. Yeah. And so I guess what I'm trying to do, Maya, is put you in the same conundrum that Ben and I feel like we're always in, which is we advise people to go out and hunt down these scholarships if they can, because, hey, if it's the right school for you and you can go for $0, then why wouldn't you go for $0? But then every time I say that, I just realized that there's also these people down here who are going to be one of the few people on campus who are paying full price.
Now, what about if they do exceptionally well first year? Right? They had a hard time during COVID pivoting to, right? Their GPA wasn't where it needed to be.
LSAT, yeah. We hear all the same excuses.
Every now and then you will see some students who do better than their numbers should have predicted. Yep. And those students, you have additional avenues of funding coming open to you heading into 2L year, whether it be TA, GA. I mean, my students, I won't talk about UGA, but just if I look more broadly at the 5 Georgia schools, I have students on full rides there that has nothing to do with merit aid from the law school. They've gone and they have found other ways to get jobs at the undergraduate, right? If they're one of my athletes and they tutor for the undergraduate and that comes with a tuition waiver, we don't have to take from others. There are other creative ways to find funding avenues and to keep your loan costs down. If you're willing to live frugally, take on a roommate, right? Different things like that. And those are all the things that we're talking through.
But and sure, there are exceptions. There are people who will go there, pay full price, and be the valedictorian. Unlikely, but there are exceptional cases. There are also people who are there on, and I would love to learn more about these other sources of funding. But what percentage of students who are on a full ride would you say are there because of tuition assistance from the school?
Yes, so the majority, the merit aid that students receive, the majority of that I tell my students to expect to come from the school itself.
Almost exclusively from the school itself.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's 100 people at the school on a full ride, it's 98 of them are there because of a full ride that was given by the school, right? It's easier for the school to say, oh, we'll charge you $0 than it is for some other outside person to give somebody the tuition money.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Okay, cool. Let's shift topic a little bit. Talk to me about Plank. I'm excited to learn more.
Yes, we are incredibly excited. In 2020, Plank, the Pre-Law Advisor National Council, had a phenomenal conference scheduled to meet in New Orleans and we're talking days before everyone got on planes, the world shut down. So now the Plank conferences occur it's a quadrennial conference, so it's in a presidential election year. That's how they're easy to remember. So this is the first time in 8 years we will meet as a group, and the Plank conferences are phenomenal because they draw pre-law advisors from institutions, 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions from across the country. They draw all of the law school admissions teams to come and connect and learn together, learn from each other, along with the vendors. And so it really puts everyone in the pre-law advising profession and space in a single location just once every 4 years. So registration is open right now. We'll be meeting in June for 4 days. And we're just excited not only to have fun, but to learn. Again, there have been so many changes. It's hard for so many of our pre-law advisors who are full-time faculty and other things to stop and pause and be able to dedicate time to professional development. And Plank provides this opportunity. It provides an opportunity to connect directly and collect those updates from the primary sources. We're able to learn from each other. We're able to brainstorm with each other. But more so, I think where Planck is so important and the APLAs are so important, because the 6 regional APLAs feed into Planck, right? Those are their members. But it gives you a community. So I'm the only full-time pre-law advisor. I'm in an office, but everyone else does health careers. So, as the pre-law advisor, I sit alone and I think through these things that I'm learning alone. So Planck really provides a phenomenal opportunity for community, for networking, to build friendships that my phone this morning, most of my text message have been to my other pre-law advisor friends that are in states near and far as we're processing, again, new changes. We're hearing about things. How would you handle this? How do I find students resources to this? Where are some different diversity resources? Did you see this upcoming deadline for UVA? Their new pipeline program is coming really rapidly. So it really allows, especially so many of us who are somewhat isolated in our own home institutions, a community. And that's why I think it is so important. You've got a support network. You've got a group of people who have your same job in various degrees across the nation that you can lean on and ask for support from, that are doing and trying to help and advocate for students, support students the same way that you are.
Perfect point to segue. What is happening right now in law school admissions? You said things have changed significantly this year.
Well, of course, we had the fair admissions decision that came out of SCOTUS, and the schools in the middle of a new software update also had an opportunity to pause, get with their general counsels, typically on most of their home campuses, read the majority opinion and decide exactly what they wanted to do. So most of the universities, law schools, have pivoted away from the traditional personal statement, diversity statement, although some still do call it and title the statements that they're collecting from students, those two things. A lot of the schools now talk about a statement of purpose and a statement of perspective. But what we have seen, and this, if I do have students who are current cycle applicants applying right now, be patient, be patient, be patient. This is a slow cycle because of the adjustment and modifications to the various statements. What we have seen from most of the law schools is they now have maybe still that personal statement or statement of purpose, but now they have 2, 3, 4 additional options. So it took the students longer because they wanted to narrowly tailor those applications and those individual statements to properly convey to the schools how excited they are and a good fit for those schools. It took the students longer to complete the applications. It is taking the law schools longer to read and review files. And so I do think that is one piece of why I think this is a slow cycle. A secondary piece, of course, is with the LSAT LSAC partnered with a new proctor through Prometrics. And so for the LSAT, now the students had the option, they could go to a testing center, or they could still continue it in a private acceptable room individually. As those proctors got up to speed, I had several students, and I know my students weren't alone. This was nationally. August, September, some of those proctoring situations were rocky. And it pushed back for many of the students getting a conducive environment to getting a good, strong score on the books. And it might have pushed that. So you had the test pushing back a little bit, possibly through no fault of the students. It could have just been some technical issues and some training issues that needed to be finessed. You have the students spending more time on wanting to narrowly tailor and do a really good job to build strong applications. And that is going to mean drafting more statements And so I do think, of course, February, March will start. I do think my students, because a lot of the schools will have seat deposit deadlines in April and May, will start hearing. You shouldn't expect to hear from every school every year. I have students who don't hear from every school they applied to. We certainly can follow up with schools, but it has been slower for students to get their files completed, and as anticipated with software changes and other things going on behind the scenes, slower for schools to get those files under review and completion.
Are April and May the earliest deposit deadlines, or are there deposit deadlines earlier than that?
So there's, of course, the early binding deadlines. And so if it depends on if you're talking early binding or general admissions. So
you don't advise people to apply to binding early admissions very often, I bet.
Very rarely. So the interesting thing with early binding is typically no, because merit aid and cost is one of those critical factors.
Let's talk about price before I bind myself to your school.
Yes. Yeah. However, some of the early binding schools come with significant, you're guaranteed $40,000 a year, or some of the schools have done things differently. They've now revised what they're doing, but some of those early bindings came with full rides. And if they knew that they were geographically bound to that area because they had a spouse who was a faculty at that school and they could bind themselves early to that school, that made perfect sense, right? There are scenarios where early binding could make sense for an individual student, but typically no. Typically, the student should apply broadly. Let's see how all of it shakes out. Go to your admitted student days, do your gut check out the culture. Let's look at geography and future goals and cost and all of the factors and make a best fit law school analysis for you and your individual goals. And that's where I think pre-law advisors are so important. And for those who exist in the advising space, it takes students a long time to collect this information, to process this information, and to figure out, even once they start getting their acceptances, what actually is a best fit. And that's where I think I work with students often 4, 5, 6 years before we have to go through the which school are you going to accept. I'm getting to know the students pretty well, and I know what their goals are. I know what their outcomes are. I know. I've got to know their families. So I feel like I'm in a really good position to try to support their end goals. Yeah. If I've had the good fortune to have that length of relationship. And if I haven't, I'll do my best to get to know you as quickly as I can. But that's where I know one of the questions I often get is from students outside of my institution. So every now and then the pre-law advisors will go and will stand in at one of the LSAC forums. We'll have a pre-law advisor table there. And one of the questions we often get is, well, how do I find out if there's a pre-law advisor at my home institution? Well, if you're a current student, I hope, and I know not all institutions have the good fortune of having a designated pre-law advisor, but most of them do, because that's how you get the data reports for your home institution. And so when you sign into your LSA, when the students sign into the LSAC account, LSAC has changed this for us over the past couple of months, 6 months ago or 12 months ago. You now have your designated for your undergraduate institution pre-law advisor of record on your home screen, so that you could reach out to that. We actually Plank asked LSAC if they would help students be able to more readily identify who their pre-law advisor is. And LSAC was very gracious and put that on, so hopefully most students can identify
yes. If they've come that far that they're actually opening up an LSAC account, then they're serious about law school. Then
and we would hope that they would connect.
Their advisor, the phone number would be helpful.
And then if you're an alumni, I always say reach back out to your undergraduate institution, because for reporting purposes, you're mine, right? So I want to support you too. And so I'm willing, whether I've got alumni that's been out 1, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whether they're 65 and retiring and pivoting back to law school. Love to help you. It would be my pleasure. So reach back out to your undergraduate institution and find out if there's a designated pre-law advisor who may serve their alumni. Some institutions are willing and have the capacity to serve alumni. Some others, I think, once you've been out, certainly our institution, we serve current students and alumni, but I'm a small liberal arts institution, so I have the good fortune of having the time and capacity to do that. I understand many of my colleagues at large state universities would not have that option. But it's worth reaching out and seeing if they have any suggestions. And then, of course, when you go to your LSAC forums and other things like that, there are pre-law advisor tables and people on hand to take general questions if you just have some quick questions as well, if you haven't been able to identify someone from your home institutions.
Yeah, that's great. Are you willing to speculate on what you think the fallout's going to be from the Supreme Court ruling last year? Is it going to be a horror year for diverse applicants? Is it going to be a huge spike in white and Asian applicant or admittees?
I fear that a lot of students were hesitant to apply maybe this cycle when and pre-law advisors and law schools are encouraging them to please, please, please apply. Like, we all want a diverse bar. We want the profession to be representative of the America that we serve. And I think that most, either those of us at Plank, those of us in the APLAs, really want and are fighting to support our underrepresented and our diverse applicants.
Yeah.
The challenge there, I think, is if you haven't had a pre-law advisor telling you, hey, go read the Roberts majority. They didn't say, student, you can't disclose this information. They said, law school, you can't make your decisions based on certain factors. And some of the law schools have been quite cautious. I look at my own law school, who was a named litigant at Chapel Hill, of course, or the undergraduate. The Chapel Hill, some of the schools are going blind admissions, where LSAC is going to hold, and it's a pretty significant number of law schools, will hold some of the demographics information until you've seated your class, and then it will be made available to you because, of course, you still need to meet your ABA reporting requirements. But just to make sure that they're not being told that they're using the data inaccurately on the admission side.
If you're Black, you can put that in your personal statement, even if UNC is not having you check boxes anymore.
If you look at the language, and this is why the schools have given you so many options and opportunities, tell me, what is your statement of perspective? Where do you come from? How has some hardships that you've overcome driven your path to law school? And so I think pre-law advisors have been hoping and encouraging and making sure that the students aren't feeling discouraged, because I think it's more important than ever that students who are passionate about justice, equity, right, are going to law school. So I know that I certainly have heard from many deans in the law school environment, many undergraduate deans, etc., presidents, who worry about the next decade and its impact of this decision, and that pre-law advisors and others in the profession are going to have to take a more active, encouraging advocacy role as we make sure that none of the students themselves are discouraged from applying, because they can absolutely tell their story. And I hope they're telling the story. Actually, Law School X gave you 7 options to tell your story. Yeah. That's why it's taking so long to get these applications completed and slowing down the completion rate. But take those opportunities. Tell your story. Tell us. Everyone says what makes a strong application. Like, you want all of the components to fit together, and you want, I always think about when you've got your transcripts. We can see what classes, we've got your resume, we can see how engaged you are, what leadership roles you've taken. But look at the options that you have to tell your story. And if it's asking you about a statement of perspective, tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about, give me the grit statement. Tell me about like what drives you. And then on the statement of purpose, tell me about why what you're passionate about is driving this step to law school. And let me piece all of that together as one complete story, right? So when all of the components, chapters in a book work to tell your narrative, your story, that makes for a rock star application. But you've got to take some time in putting those pieces together, being responsive to the questions that the law schools are asking. The other thing that I will tell the students who are starting to prepare applications or looking at applications, whether it be for this cycle or for next, read the instructions carefully. So yes, it is going to take you longer than you think to prepare the LSAT, the GRE, whatever you're going to use.
Yeah.
Give yourself double the time, triple the time than you thought you needed, because you may need to take it twice. You may need, right? It's 5 times in 5 years. You've got plenty of time to try to get this score to a competitive level, but you need to put in the time.
So then what do you say to somebody who says, but I have to apply, I have to start law school this cycle, I have to start law school this fall?
I say to them, why?
I'm 27.
I say to them, and so what I get more commonly at my institution is I've got 17, 18, 19-year-olds that somehow got done in high school at 16.
I don't want to take a gap year.
They don't want to take a gap year. That's what I'm getting all the time. And I say, why? Right? You're not even 21. Like all the social fun stuff at law school, you at least need some of that is unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, around some drinking opportunities often or networking opportunities. Why do you want to do this at 19, at 20, right? Like let's go out and do something really fun, travel, work on languages, do some other things on the path. What I am doing is I'm meeting not only with the students, but their parents. It is very, very rarely the student who is giving themselves a directive that they must go through directly to graduate school. It is more typically a parent who is worried that if they take any step outside an educational environment, they won't find their way back. So if I can meet with the parents and the students and let's talk about timelines, let's talk about how we can strengthen your application. If while at Furman, you get one shot at an undergraduate GPA, choose the right major, choose what you're passionate about so you love what you're studying and you're going to do better. And while you're at undergraduate, focus on undergraduate. You get one shot at an undergraduate GPA. You get 5 shots at the LSAT. Yeah. I hope we're not going to torture you and make you take all 5, but if we need to. Some of the schools won't love that, but that's okay. There might be reasons there where we have to take it multiple times.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Well, I've sent people to, I've got somebody who's at Yale right now who took it 5 times.
Yeah.
I have somebody who's at Harvard right now who took it 5 times. I have somebody I have students all across the country who are at on full ride scholarships at great schools who took it 5 times. So where does that stigma actually come from?
So I think, well, one, you're going to have to pay $222 each time you take each of those 5 tests. So there is some cost piece to it, right? Like, so if let's say money's no issue because you got the highest level of
we also have to compare
got you the first 2.
The bigger money to the like $222.
We absolutely do, and
times 5 is nothing compared to 50,000 times 3.
Typically, the bigger issue there is often the mental fatigue that goes into being in the materials for a very extended period. And what am I doing between test 3 and 4? Or what am I doing between test 4 and 5 to actually improve my score? But yes, I will have students who take it 5 times. There's no doubt about it, because they need to, because we need to make them a competitive applicant. And that if you're allowed 5 times, students have that option, and that option should be theirs.
Yeah, only your highest score counts.
Only every score is reported to your law school. It is the highest score that the law schools must report to the ABA. Now, if you look, we talked about what things are changing. If you look at the US News World rankings and you look at the new formula that goes into those rankings, your GPA plus your LSAT score make up 9%, right? Now, I don't think that has translated to how I still think schools are being pretty traditional in the way that they are seating their class.
Well,
And when my
how do
dean
they how do
when my
they
dean
judge for
says
employability, right?
so you interview. I personally think if I was in law school admissions and had capacity, I would be interviewing every single student.
Yeah.
But again, there's capacity issues there, and I'm certainly not telling law schools what to do. I'm just
Yeah.
saying if I was in that world and could figure out the timing, I'm adding interviews.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, it's a
yeah.
little hard when you've got 10,000 applications for 500 spots.
Clearly could never do it, right? Yeah. Although there are some schools, I'm always blown away. I had students obviously have interviewed at Georgetown recently and UVA and some of these different places. So there certainly are schools that, whether it be group interviews or individual interviews, or some schools don't do it for admissions, but do it for the merit aid allocation, so some schools are figuring out some it's a recorded interview. So you get 2 or 3 shots to, which are not my favorite. Yeah. I'd much rather talk to a person than stare at my head on a screen. And, you get 2 or 3 opportunities to redo it, and you can never get it the way you want it. But, so in any case, the numbers matter. There's no doubt the numbers matter. The numbers matter for admission. The numbers matter for merit aid. And that's why if the students would please give themselves plenty of time, 1 shot at an undergraduate GPA, multiple shots at the LSAT, but give yourself ample time. In a perfect world, we would have at the very least your first LSAT, if not a second, before we start cycle, so that we can start building a school list. I do question whether, because of the volume of materials that the law schools got, because a lot of students did diligently work through all the optional essays, maybe, or many of them, whether we will see from this cycle to next cycle. I do think we'll see some tweaking of some of those optionals. Some of them work better. Some of them, they got collected data that was more helpful than others. In terms of, I think we'll tweak, because every now and then I'll have a student who says, oh yeah, I've jumped in, I've opened the applications. I'm like, why? You're applying next cycle. Are you just trying to get out of studying for the LSAT right now? Why did this seem like a good idea to jump in and work through an application when we could have different questions by next cycle?
So there seems to be a bit of a conflict. I've noticed some of the stuff that Access Lex has done, and did you see their report that they put out last week, the study about application timing among historically underrepresented applicants?
I have seen the summary. I have not done any form of a deep dive, nor spoken to anyone at Access Lex about the data they collected.
Okay. Yeah, I read the whole thing, and I want to dig into it more and think about it more, but they seem to be missing the advice, and it's so well-meaning, this advice for, for lack of a better word, diverse applicants, or underrepresented is probably an even better word, applicants. The advice they don't seem to get the piece that says, your grades are really important. You really should be getting A's if you can. And then the LSAT is also really, really important, and you should be getting the best LSAT you can. Then your applications are important, and then making the decision is important. But instead, the advice seems to be, and I've seen this in various other pipeline programs as well, and it always just concerns me. It's like on day 1, they have kids working on their personal statement. And it's like, well, okay, but they're getting B's and C's in their undergraduate classes. What are we doing?
That is why I typically advise my students 1 shot an undergraduate GPA. Plus, I want you to do all the fun things you come to undergraduate to
Take
do.
advantage of the
enjoy
school you're actually in right now.
Yes, and that I tell my students that every day. Like I also am going to tell them as incoming freshmen. I think we use first years. We don't use the term freshman anymore, but sophomores. I am not trying to put pressure on you, but I do want to make you aware that here are the ABA required disclosures. Do with it what you may, but choose your major wisely, assess aptitudes, go after what you're passionate about. But if you've got one job while you're at undergraduate, in addition to enjoying yourself and making lifelong friends and all the fun things you came here to do and making phenomenal relationships with faculty, etc., that are going to last a lifetime, handle the classroom. Please, please, please handle the classroom.
Yeah.
Then we'll take on the LSAT. Once we have that piece, which is going to take us a lot longer to prepare than you would think, I would say if I can, and there are always exceptions to the rule. You know, my husband's a statistician. He's deals in the area of extreme value theory, and he's a pain in the rear because he can take the GRE, the LSAT, and get perfect scores and not ever study for it. But his brain looks for patterns for a living. Most of us don't do that, right? Like everyone is a little bit different. But what I will say, most of my students are going to need 4-5 months probably to pull off in the LSAT materials, to pull off a good, strong first, maybe second attempt at a good score.
Attempt. Yeah. And what we always say is, okay, you've been taking practice tests. You've been taking timed practice tests. You know what your practice tests, by the way, those practice tests are all real LSAT tests in their day. So, you know, it's not like there's any trick to it. You take that test under time conditions, you figure out your score. Well, that would have been your score on that day. Okay, so you know what your current level is based on your practice test scores. Then, okay, do you want to take the official test? Are you ready to take the official test? If those are your practice test scores, are you ready? And then on any given one trial, right? It's just one flip of a coin. Well, it could be heads, could be tails. And heads might be a good day for you. Tails might be a bad day for you. Well, if you score poorly relative to your own practice tests, then surely we have to plan on taking it again.
Yes, that's typically the advice we're giving them.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
So then it's like you need to plan, you know, you could
to
plan
take it 2-3 times
minimum. Like you
at
should
least.
at least have that plan.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm always going to have at least one backup.
Yeah.
So and that's true even when you're taking it for a third time, you should still have another backup, right? If we get down that far down the road, then you need to be open to the possibility that like, hey, maybe 3 isn't going to be my final attempt.
You know, I don't know exactly the timeline that Access Lex has their Lex Fellows on, the fellows that they were talking about that I think are citing. So I will say that more and more of the pipeline programs, and we are seeing a growth in pipeline programs as a result and a reaction to SCOTUS, right?
That's
which
fantastic.
is great, right? We want it.
Yes.
But I am seeing more and more of them build it around a 2-year curriculum rather than one, and you're going to need all 2 years, right?
Oh, one makes absolutely no sense.
Well, you don't have enough. Students keep it's the same thing where students will say, no, I've got to matriculate directly, and I say, why? Okay, let's get your parents in on this. Let's talk about pros and cons.
Yeah.
But understand we're releasing then your transcript, because we do a summer application workshop series where we'll work through all the pieces throughout the summer, because you know typically they've got a little bit more opportunity you know, over a lunch hour or something as a job or internship than they'll have with. You can never, ever find a time when there's not a class conflict. It's right. Impossible to get all your students on your campus together at one place in one time. Right. It is absolutely impossible. So the summer, we have a better opportunity to slowly work through a piece at a time, all of the application components. And it's a little bit more relaxed, and we can just knock out one thing at a time as we, you know, kind of getting some of the CNF documents together so that we're ready for any of the character and fitness questionnaires that are coming. You know, we're collecting DMV records, and, you know, we just do it leisurely over the summer. We're thinking about themes. We're thinking about why, you know, you want to live in certain regions. We're collecting letters of recommendation. We're releasing transcripts, etc. But if you're a student matriculating directly through, you're releasing your transcript after junior year. That probably means that now we might supplement it after your fall of senior year, but we're probably releasing so that we can collect all the transcripts from dual enrollment high school, undergraduate, maybe some study abroad, depending on the scenario, so that we've got the LSAC calculated GPA in play as one of the 2 data points to build a school list. And
Right.
so we're having to move all of that along. And a lot of my students say, but wait, I waited till senior year to take any of the fun classes. I had to take all the general education requirements, and then I switched my major. It's going to be senior year before
So now
I
you're
get some of
applying
those.
with a lower GPA than you would get if you had taken the gap year.
And it is very, and I do have students who make a good argument as to the fact that they are ready. This is purposeful. They've collected the information, and I'm going to support them. But overwhelmingly, students are going to at least need the application year with me while bringing in some income to offset some of those startup costs at law school.
Yeah.
And that's at a minimum.
Yeah. Maya, I've already taken way more of your time than I think you were probably planning on. Can I ask you one, maybe one or two rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. LSAT alternatives like GRE and JD Next, are these good options, or should applicants stick to the LSAT?
The majority of students that I am supporting in an application cycle are typically taking the LSAT. There are many reasons there. I have had students apply on a GRE and do incredibly well and have placed at phenomenal institutions. So for the right student who already has a rock and roll GRE in hand and knows that every school they will be applying to admits on a GRE, there could be a scenario that I agree with their assessment. More commonly, students are taking the LSAT, taking the GRE, not talking to their pre-law advisors, and then thinking they get to pick and choose. That is incorrect. Please know that if you have LSATs and GREs, right, anything in the last 5 years, 5 times in your 5-year period, so on that 5-year report, you are going to have to report every LSAT you have taken. It is the high score that matters for reporting purposes, but you are going to have to report every score. And some schools may even ask you for additional information past that. I hope they don't. And when I see it on applications, I've been calling the schools and asking them to please remove those questions. But at the very least, you know that they are going to ask that you are going to have to report everything for the last 5 years. So the slight caveat to GRE is that you have a more limited group of schools, right? It's not going to open you up to application to all nearly 200. And so that would need to work for you. I also, you are going to need to talk to every school on your list and confirm that merit aid is extended to GRE applicants, and you need to take that affirmative step or work with your pre-law advisor to collect that information.
Because they might be giving merit aid in order to boost their LSAT median. They might not be interested in boosting
because it's double
GRE
digits.
stats.
Typically, if you look at the 509s, so if you look at the 509s for a Georgetown or one of these, large schools that we know's got disproportionately high number of joint degree candidates, you are going to see the on the 509 reports the quant, the verbal, and the writing scores listed for GRE candidates because they're in excess of that 12 that they seated in their class this past year. But you will see, I think the numbers were almost higher a couple of years ago when the option first became available than it even is now. Because if you don't seat that sufficient number, even though behind the scenes the law schools have to report it, it's not even going to hit the 509s. So it's very hard for you as a candidate to determine your level of competition if we don't have that information on the 509. So the other difficulty for pre-law advisors, LSAC does a wonderful job of each of the 8 typically administrations in a year. When score release comes out, the following day, the designated pre-law advisor at their home institution gets a report of all the scores for the students who have opted in to share. That we use in advising our students. Some of our students don't like to come to us and report lower than expected test scores. And I get it, right? Like, I completely get it. I am never here to judge you. I'm here to support you, but I need accurate information to do so. Even if it is a difficult conversation to have, know that is more so you're going to need your pre-law advisor's support in those scenarios.
And your LSAT teacher support, by the way.
And
please tell your
without
LSAT teacher
a doubt, please,
your score.
because if you're not giving accurate scores, if you're not reporting accurate data, we're not giving you good advice at all. The JD Next is interesting. I like the fact that students have options. I would love, right? Again, there are some students, many of the undergraduate institutions have gone test optional, and there's just some students that for whatever reason have this barrier in their head about taking multiple choice tests or whatever it is that they have built up, whether it exists or not, it exists in their brain. And so to have this option where you could take a 10 weeks contracts course and take an exam at the end and be able to showcase your ability to convey that information in another format, I love options. At this moment in time, JD Next, of course, they just hired a psychometrician in the past month or so to start putting some of those data pieces together so that they can get materials to the ABA, who's awaiting comment right now to determine the valid and reliable test. And so it is evolving. We are all continuing to watch. I am not currently working with any students who are executing that option because it really is typically only in a handful of pilot schools at this point in time. But before I recommended students take that option, we would have to talk to the schools about, are they going to admit, well, one, the ABA has to collect data and make sure that everything is in play. And now over a quarter of schools have applied and received variances. So it is something we, as pre-law advisors, are watching, no doubt. But there are additional data pieces that need to be collected before we can properly and accurately advise our students. We need to find out how is the law school going to admit on this as a standalone test? Is it going to be a secondary test to an LSAT that's on file, and therefore what is the value added in having this secondary measure if, again, merit aid is going to be so heavily attached to an LSAT score? That is something, we're all trying to figure out. So I love that students, I hope that, again, they continue to have lots of options so that we can get great students to law schools who will be phenomenal attorneys. But at this moment in time, I think the law schools are collecting information. The ABA is collecting data and everything that they'll get from the psychometrician who's now onboarded. And the law schools will have to figure out their reporting process and a lot of other things in the implementation stage before we're willing to tell a student, don't take certain tests and do this other one. We just don't have enough data at this point. But continuing to observe, and I'm all for having as many options as possible to get as many students to law school that will be rockstar attorneys.
Any other big changes in the landscape of law school admissions or anything else I'm forgetting to tell?
I want to add one piece to your students who are applying, who maybe are going to take the exam in spring or summer as they are prepping for this next cycle, likely. So several of the law schools have mentioned to us, and this came up at AALS in January, that with the rise of AI in all of our industries, the students should treat the LSAT writing seriously. If you remember back when I took the LSAT many, many years ago, it was a handwritten, even I think my bars were handwritten. That's how old I am. But while they were handwritten, chicken scratch, the law schools, it wasn't worth their time. Now that they are typed, professional written pieces that demonstrate you as an individual in a closed arena's ability to write under a timed scenario, some of the law schools have indicated that they will actually start their review of your application with the LSAT writing.
Any big names?
It was just mentioned generally because they want to see how you convey thoughts and sort thoughts together.
I could see doing that. I mean, I could just see myself with a huge stack of those LSAT writing, and I would be basically just good, bad.
And more so they're looking at how much help have you had in the rest of your file? Because you've got students who do pay to get people to review multiple statements and et cetera like that may not be there. Or you have students using AI. And this is my word of caution to your students. Some of the law schools say in their instructions, use AI, we don't care. and then the student can do whatever they want for that law school application. However, and this is a big however, some of the law schools state in their instructions that you are prohibited from using any forms of AI in the preparation and development of your statements. Can you use Grammarly? I don't know, right? Like, that's what we're all debating right now. But understand that you are filing a certification that says you've complied with their instructions. So you need to read the instructions carefully. And it may be that AI, whatever prepared statement that you use for schools A, B, and C needs to be shredded, and you need to start over and narrowly tailor and write a more closed statement for these different schools that prohibit you from using any form of AI, because you could be running into character and fitness violations.
And don't blow off LSAT writing these days, because people might actually read it. I do want to say, though, LSAT writing is the easiest thing to prepare for, and it shouldn't take anybody more than 10 minutes to prepare for it.
It should not slow anyone down. So you have access to it 8 times before you've taken your test. You only have to take it once. It's nothing to worry about.
It's so formulaic. It's
please
the easiest thing
actually
you're ever
respond to the prompt, because the law schools are more likely right now to read it to get a feel for your writing style than they have in the past. And that would just be something that students should be aware of.
Makes sense. Yeah. And because, again, to go somebody like me, I wouldn't read the whole thing. I would read like the first 2 sentences, and I can tell you're either writing clearly or you're not. And
you can compare that writing style with the personal statement,
their personal statement, if I wasn't sure.
And you can get a feel for whether what is a good, strong statement. It is authentic, it is genuine, it is honest. And the writing might give me a small window into whether that's in case the fact.
One more question, and then I really am going to let you go. But this is going to burn if I don't ask you. I'm going to regret it. So, what do you say to students who want to talk about their ADD on their application documents?
I say, if a personal statement, and again, call it what you may, it's going to be called, is not the place for it.
Would you want it anywhere in the application?
It is going to depend on the student. Understand that if you disclose that information, it is going into a record. It's going to then get delivered to the bar. This is information. Your medical record is information that went through lawsuits for you to protect, and it is yours. And you should think about, is this something you want to share broadly? Because it does become a part of your record. So I have my students think about this consideration. So I think the question is it necessary? And then we talk through, if in the personal statement, it should be positive. I will often looking forward, and I want to be really excited about that. If there is an addendum that needs to be added because there are holes in the record, something's wrong. It's not adding up. The student I'm seeing in the rest of this application, what's going on with these grades during this time period before they got medicated or whatever. There may be a legitimate reason that in a clean and concise addendum, you may want to highlight it. But I also caution students, it shouldn't be in the personal statement. That's not the place for it. Unless for students to talk about, even whether it be mental health, whether it be disabilities, or anything in the personal statement, it better be critical to your reason for going to law school. There better be one heck of a story there. Otherwise, the only place that I would even consider placing any of those materials would be an addendum, and you would have to convince me that it is necessary to strengthen your application to even place it there. And at this point in time, a lot of my students aren't sufficiently convincing for us to even place it there. Because think about, you've just read this incredible personal statement. You've looked at this fantastic student, and you've talked about why they want to go to this law school. And then you get down to the tail end, which is an addendum, and now we're highlighting what could be a perceived weakness.
Well, because aren't you also telling the reader that you could have gotten accommodations on the LSAT?
Now, so I would never disclose that information. What I will tell students is as you are going and visiting your law schools, if I'm an individual who knows that accommodations is going to be critical to my ability to thrive at law school, I am making sure that that is part of after I've been accepted,
at the school,
and that they have a fantastic office
before
of
you say yes.
student support to make sure that the necessary personnel and support is there for me to succeed. So that is a factor in my admissions decision. But that is protected information. I wouldn't disclose any of that. That's none of the law school's business in the admissions piece.
What do you say to students so there's a question that says, please explain if you improved your LSAT by 10 points. And the student wants to respond with, oh, well, I wasn't accommodated the first time I took it, but I was accommodated the next time I took it.
I would ask the question of, is it an optional statement or is it a required statement? And if it is required, I think you answer honestly and just you should be answering all questions honestly in the application. But I mean, you could say additional factors led to my ability to succeed in the second test. I mean, I had students who thought a proctoring center would be a perfect fit for them until they got to the proctoring center and realized that the person on their right 30 minutes after they started was starting the GRE, and the person to their left was starting the MCAT, and the proctor was going to ask them 14 times in the middle of the test whether they needed additional scratch paper, and they just left in tears. Now that person then went and took the test at a later scenario, and they did it on their own in a private room that was authorized, and their proctor came back after the halftime. And, if schools are requiring you, because they need context as well, what is a legitimate score? How do I tell? I think you answer honestly, but you don't have to over disclose.
Well, you can answer honestly without disclosing 100% of the information that might be relevant to the answer, right? I mean, the real answer might be, yeah, I needed to get these accommodations. I was stupid for taking it without accommodations. Now I have accommodations and I can do better. But you still don't you still could answer the question with, I thought I could do better, so I took it again.
And some of my students have no problem disclosing that information, right? Like, everyone's a little different. I just want the students to know that that's their private record, and they don't have to disclose it if they don't want to.
Aren't you worried, though, that the schools will then discriminate against them based on that information? I mean...
Yeah, I worry about, is it going to raise a red flag for their ability to succeed on the bar exam, where they may or may not get the same accommodations in meeting deadlines in the workplace, and they're concerned about that, which is why I typically tell students, protect any information that's yours to be protected, because you're not required to disclose it. There's been many lawsuits that have established that right as yours.
No, there used to be an asterisk on your record. Then now there's no asterisk on your record until I see students all the time they're just on the verge of disclosing that stuff, where it's like, but.
So just walk through the concerns with them, give them it is their application, highlight your concerns. I also, when a student's really concerned, I will have the student in here. I won't disclose the student's name. I will call a school and let the school know that I have a student sitting with me. I don't want to, I'm going to protect their identity, but we have a general question for you. Please, give us advice. So you can also use your pre-law advisors to help you collect information directly from the law schools when you don't want to disclose your identity. That could be helpful in making an informed decision. Please, I think my greatest frustration is a lot of students don't use their pre-law advisors, or use them so late in the process. Yeah. We could have really been far more helpful had we connected at an earlier stage. Yeah. And so if you have resources there, if your tuition is already paid for you to have these resources there, please, please, please connect with them and use them so that you can at least walk through some of these concerns and considerations with someone before you hand over information you didn't realize you don't have to.
Perfect place to wrap it up. Maya Russell is the pre-law advisor at Furman University. She's also the chair of the Pre-Law Advisor National Council, which we call plank and a bunch of other things. I hope to see you, Maya, in New Orleans later this year for that
Yes.
plank conference. And how do people reach out to you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so plank.org, if anyone is, whether they be vendors, whether they be pre-law advisors, whether they be law school admissions, we have plenty of information on the quadrennial conference there. Obviously, all of our board, if you look at our board, I'm currently chair and all my information is there. Or if you just do a search for Furman and pre-law advisor, Maya Russell is the first name that pops up, and you'll have all my information there. No problem. I have a strange Australian pronunciation of my name.
I didn't know that was an Australian thing, huh? Maya. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the month of May. But in any case, yes, you can shoot me an email, and if you want to chat, I can talk law school admissions and considerations all day, every day. And
you are a good talker. It's true. Me too.
I'm in a fortunate position where I get paid to do this. So let's connect. I'm excited to hear from you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Maya. I've learned a lot. Hope to have you back. I'm going to have to start saving up a list of questions for you, and we'll have you back on periodically if you're game to answer.
Fabulous. And we will see you in New Orleans in June. I'm excited.
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Word of the week. We have a submission here from Bryce.
Yeah, the subject is Word of the Week, elucidation. Hi, Ben and Nathan. I was reading The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. Great book, says Bryce, and came across a candidate for Word of the Week. What beliefs about the stars, for example, does he, the scientist, bring to the study of chemistry or electricity? This is quoting the book. And what aspects of the complex phenomenon that then results strike him as particularly relevant to the elucidation of the nature of chemical change or of electrical affinity? Okay. Merriam-Webster defines elucidate as to make lucid, especially by explanation or analysis. Bryce then writes, thank you for instilling the habit of defining words while I read. It makes a big difference. Bryce, P.S. I have a 172 LSAT on record, and I'm still in school with a 4.0 in physics. I'm getting greedy and pushing for a higher score on the June test when I'm on break for the summer. Thank you for the help to get here and the motivation to keep going.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's going to be a successful law school application.
For sure. Yeah.
And, it doesn't need to force in an early application. You've got your 172 and your 4.0. I mean, that's the type of student who's going to get one of those full ride offers.
Yeah.
And so that's the part that makes me so anxious about the Access Lex folks that we were talking about at the top of the show. Because I just think those are the people who are going to be lined up to pay for Bryce's education. They're going to borrow. They're going to pay full price. Bryce is going to breeze in for free.
Yep.
And yeah, he's going to graduate with no debt, and they're going to graduate with, a couple $100,000 in debt.
That's our goal, to elucidate what's happening here. By the way, on this word, the definition says to make lucid. For some people, they may have to look up the word lucid. Lucid means clear. And to elucidate something means to make it clear, to make it something that people can understand.
Yeah, it's got a root in the same thing as it's related to light, right? Because it's like lumen.
Lucid. Yeah, I think, lucid to me, you can think of, exactly, like light. You can see through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In college, I read a book about lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Techniques that you could try to do to enable yourself to be conscious while you're dreaming.
Have you done that?
I tried when I was in college. I don't think I ever had any success. I have had lucid dreams from time to time.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, normally it's just like, have you ever had a dream where you could fly?
Nah. Well, yeah, but I don't think, I thought the point of lucid dreaming was that you control, or you have a lot more conscious. Yeah. Autonomy.
And so that's how I have experienced it when I have experienced it in very limited circumstances. It's been like, oh wow, I'm dreaming. Oh, I could fly. Cool. And then take off flying and then wake up. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Bryce. I put one on here last night. I was reading, I am reading a cool book about it's during President Garfield's administration, and he's about to get murdered by this dude, Charles Guiteau,
Okay.
Guiteau, Guiteau, I would say.
Okay.
There was a quote from a senator, John Logan, senator from Illinois, who said, "I thought there was some derangement of his mental organization." I'm marveling throughout the book at how well spoken everybody seems to be back in the day.
Yeah.
Like all these senators and stuff, they had such amazing vocabularies. Like when I was just reading recently a biography or history, and I was talking about Taft. And like every former president that I've read about prior to, the 50s or whatever,
Yeah.
they were all like so educated and so well spoken. And anyway, I thought there was some derangement of his mental organization. What do you think that might mean?
It sounds like messed up, right? Derangement sounds like disorganized or jacked.
Yeah, I looked it up, and there's a special usage of this word because I had never heard it I'd never heard deranged. I guess just that word, derangement.
It's a noun, right? You've heard deranged, like someone is.
I've heard deranged as an adjective.
Yeah.
But I had never heard derangement of mental organization. And so what derangement there, that's a noun.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, when I looked it up, there's a special usage of derangement to throw something into confusion or to cause to act irregularly. And this dude was crazy, this Guiteau guy. He was hanging out at the White House. It used to be so amazingly easy to get close to the president.
Yeah. It was just a house, right? People come and walk on up.
It was like everyone was just allowed to just cruise right into the White House and ask for an appointment with the president. Now, they didn't have to give you an appointment with the president, and they never did give Guiteau an appointment with the president. But he was hanging out in the White House, like using the White House stationery. He also would go to fancy hotels and like sit in their lobby for hours on end and use their stationery. And he was like pretending like he was staying at the hotel. Then he was pretending that he was writing letters from the White House. He was like saying that he has references from this senator or references from the president himself. Or he just had this derangement of his mental organization that caused him to think that he was like a critical person. But it's really kind of a cool story. Also, the President Garfield is like leaving the White House to go walk over to the Secretary of State's house in the evening. Just cruises out of the White House by himself, walks over to the house of the Secretary of State, picks up the Secretary of State. The two of them go cruising around the neighborhood, just walking around.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's about to get blasted by this crazy guy. And I guess that
Wait,
was
what
part
happened?
of-
So then did he get?
I'm not there yet. Don't spoil it for me, but I'm pretty sure that Garfield is one of our presidents who got shot. It was right after
really?
Lincoln, by the way.
Oh,
And
geez.
then, it's like it's still
Someone's-
because Lincoln's son, his only son that survived, something Todd Lincoln, I forget, Robert Todd Lincoln, maybe, is Lincoln's son, is in the book.
Okay.
But anyway, this next president is about to get blasted. We've had a lot of presidents get shot.
We have.
I think there's at least 4.
Yeah, I was just listening to an episode about Reagan getting shot.
Yep, I remember that.
Which I didn't realize that not his press secretary, somebody.
Baker, yeah.
Brady, right?
Brady, yeah, Brady.
Yeah. And that led to the Brady Act.
Yep.
Fascinating. Anyways, who are the other people? We got Lincoln.
I remember my neighbor. It was in the early 80s, right? When Reagan got shot in his first term.
Yeah, it was March. So it was like 2 months in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember.
And the guy was trying to
screaming and
impress
crying.
Jodie Foster. Like, what? What is wrong with people?
I think it's pretty consistent that the people who go ahead and shoot the president are pretty nuts. I mean,
they
don't
have a derangement of mental organization. Right?
It doesn't work out the way they think it's going to work out. So we got Reagan who was shot, Lincoln who was shot, Garfield who I'm pretty sure is about to get shot.
Okay.
Wait, I had one more. Oh, well, Kennedy.
Oh, jeez. we're totally blank for like.
I was like, it's so obvious. Why can't I think of it now?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. The most famous one was
Yeah.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's at least 4 out of our 40 something presidents who have gotten shot.
Yep.
High risk occupation.
Okay.
All right. That's it for Word of the Week. You can be LSAT famous. Please ask questions or share news with us at LSAT Demon. I want to thank Maya Russell one more time for coming on the show. Fabulous guest. Hope our listeners learned a lot from that conversation. If anybody has questions about the LSAT Demon, you can email help@lsatdemon.com. Please check out our other podcast, LSAT Demon Daily, and subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. That was episode 440 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.